Ukrainian innovations aim at reducing the impact Russia has with its strikes against the infrastructure, while a video shows how much warfare has changed, how much of a revolution has happened during this war. But we'll talk about this as well as about anything else that has happened along the front lines and behind them in the SITREP about the war in Ukraine. The Ukrainians hit a substation, an electric substation in Ulyanovsk. They also hit the Samara oil refinery and the Orenburg gas facility. Over 50% of the population in Russia has already witnessed an increase in the fuel prices, while over 90% expect continued increases in prices. 18.9%, so almost every fifth, has already seen a gas station without gasoline, and 40% have already changed their behavior in driving inside of Russia. This shows the clear impact the Ukrainians have with their strikes against the refinery, and one of the other impacts is that the Russians have started reducing the quality of the gasoline to be able to continue selling, and this is already having effects in regards to reliability of civilian cars. There are reports, for instance, that increasingly cars are stopping because of engine troubles. The Ukrainians try innovation to protect their facilities against Russia's strikes. We now see electric substations that have basically been up-armored with various protection grids. We see here on these pictures how the Ukrainians have not just created bunkers, concrete shells for the electric substations, but also have nets around it to keep the Shahed drones from hitting it directly, and thus increasing the likelihood. There are some claims that these facilities, these constructions, can take up to 20 hits from Shahed drones without budging. That obviously will have to be seen, but it clearly shows how the Ukrainians adapt to the threat. Ukraine is also aiming to produce 1,000 drone interceptors per day in the future. We already talked about it in the past, that the Ukrainians have shown to be fairly successful with attacks with those domestic drone interceptors against Russian Shahed drones. We'll switch to the developments along the front line, and here we are starting off with Sumy, where there's nothing to report. In the Vovchansk area, the Ukrainian deep state map has admitted the loss of the oil facility of Vovchansk, so the Russians have advanced somewhat on the western side of Vovchansk. In the direction of Veliki Burluk, to the east of it, the Russians have crossed the border at another point close here to Bolohivka. We have that geolocated at this point, that the Russians have been spotted directly north of Bolohivka. So at this point here, the aim seems to be clear. They want to take the control of the whole border area and thus widen their advance on the western side of the Oskil River. In Kupiansk itself, the pro-Ukrainian deep state map has increased the Russian control of the town down to the center here. We can see how much of the area now is under Russian control according to the pro-Ukrainian deep state map. So the northern part of Kupiansk is not completely under Russian control yet, but with a significant presence, and the Russians have taken control of significant parts of the northern part of western Kupiansk. That's it from Kupiansk area. In the next changes we have are from Liman. Here, from the Liman direction, here the Russians have advanced to the southwest of Mirne. Mirne is here. We have that geolocated as well, that the Russians have advanced to this point here. If they've advanced to here, then it's obviously likely that Mirne is now no longer under Ukrainian control. At least that's what we would read out of this. That's it north of the Seversky Donetsk. In the Seversk direction, I do not see any change in territory. In the Kostiantynivka direction, I do not see any change in territory either, but the big Russian mill blogger Riba is reporting that Stupochki and Predtetchine are still not under Russian control. The Riba is saying they are bypassing it, meaning that those two towns here are likely still either under Ukrainian control or at best in the contested area. The fact that the Russians have already popped up here does not change anything with this, as they are bypassing it. So infiltration tactics are working here, but the Ukrainians still hold positions east of that. In the Dobropilia area, we have another Russian mill blogger saying that the Ukrainians have been successful in the direction of Volodymyrivka. Now we need to see that the pro-Ukrainian deep state map claims that Volodymyrivka is fully under Ukrainian control. We recently had Russians attacking in this direction. There are conflicting claims whether they managed to gain a foothold or not, but overall we still have confirmation by Russia's side that the Ukrainians are having successful counterattacks in this direction. The exact front line is unclear though. In the Pokrovsk direction, the Russians have advanced at various points. We have the Russians here in the southeastern part of Mirnograd. This is in this area here. We now have the Russians. So technically inside of Mirnograd as well. The Russians have also advanced in the Ukrainians have advanced in Pershe-Travnia. This is here. This is an area that was considered even by the pro-Ukrainian deep state map as being under Russian control, roughly here, but a fresh geolocation shows Ukrainian soldiers in a position there neutralizing a Russian soldier, indicating that they actually gained a foothold at this point, so they likely managed to push the Russians somewhat back in this direction. This doesn't change that the Russians are continuing to advance inside of Pokrovsk. We now have them further east in the center of Pokrovsk, so at this point here. Recently we had them roughly here, now they are roughly here, continuing to advance inside of the center of Pokrovsk, and we also have them to the west of Pokrovsk on the western outskirts. Now this was an infiltration by the Russians, according to the Ukrainians. Those Russian soldiers killed several civilians before they were taken out with FPV drones, but they managed to gain to advance up to this point, basically cutting the main ground line of communication into Pokrovsk. The Ukrainians can still use roads up here, obviously, further to the north, and according to the claims, the Russians there are neutralized, but it shows us that the line of communication into Pokrovsk itself is seriously under threat and increasingly collapsing. That's it from the Pokrovsk direction. In the Meshova direction, we have nothing, and in the direction of Pokrovsk here, we have the Russians in the town of, they have been spotted in the town of Privilya. This is down here. We have a geolocation of them inside of Privilya. And then we have them a day later further south on the other side of the river. So the Russians are now roughly here after they have been here, indicating also that they've consolidated their control to the east of it. We had the British Ministry of Defense confirming Russian control over Verbove, and this increasingly is being confirmed further. The Russians also advanced in the town of Pavlivka. We have that geolocated to the east of Pavlivka here. This is at this point, no, at this point here. At this point, the Russians have advanced, showing us another small advance. In the direction of Huliapole, Poltavka is now being confirmed as being fully under Russian control. We have the numerous geolocations basically from north to south, from east to west inside of Poltavka. So Poltavka is fully under Russian control, as we can see the pro-Ukrainian deep state map confirming here. In the Zaporizhzhia direction, the Russians have been spotted again in Primorsk, here up at this position. In the eastern part, they have been attacked there, so whether they have been neutralized or not is unclear, but the area is now considered to be a gray zone. The Ukrainians and the Russians have also agreed to a local ceasefire here at Enihodar to allow the reconstruction of the fuel lines, of the power lines to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. It had been offline for 4 weeks due to prior shelling, and both sides have agreed to allow for the reconstruction of the electric connection. We also have this was it with territorial changes. I do not see any further changes, and overall the situation is mostly unchanged. The Russians keep advancing in this direction. In this, they are not too successful, but their pressure on Pokrovsk and Mirnograd is increasing by the day. How long both towns can hold out is unclear, but we see that the Russians now are having almost daily advances inside and are infiltrating ever deeper. So the Ukrainian position will increasingly become untenable here. Kostiantynivka more or less keeps holding. Liman, not many changes, but the Russians are advancing in Kupiansk. Once they control the western part, obviously for the Ukrainians to hold out on the eastern side will be increasingly difficult, as the overall size of the entrance to the bridgehead on the eastern side is only 20 kilometers and thus fully in FPV drone range, and thus can fully be attacked here. The Russians, from the Russian side, we have a very interesting video being published. Now this shows a mechanized attack. We see here, for instance, Russian armor advancing, and here is a Ukrainian bomber drone over this advance attacking it. And what we see here is a Russian interceptor drone engaging the Ukrainian bomber drones in an attempt to take them out. We see it burning here and falling down. How exactly it was taken out is unclear. Here it seems to throw an anchor, and that should be a Baba Yaga that was hit at this point too and is going down. So we see that in the current phase of the war, in the current scenario, there is not just the fight for air superiority between big aircraft, but also one between small ones, where small armored columns have aerial cover, not by having fighter jets circle around them, but actually by drones engaging other drones to do the exact same thing as is theoretically being done between the big fighter jets. In sabotage hybrid warfare, we have drones reported over the Munich airport and over Mallorca. So in both airfields, there have been problems with the air traffic, as drones have once again been spotted. In regards to the North Koreans in Kursk, we have a Russian mill blogger saying that the North Koreans are basically only there to train and to gain experience. Now they brought an own MLRS system that they used against Ukraine to basically try it out, but they are not engaging in fighting with the Ukrainians on the ground itself. In the political sphere, Putin has once again demanded Ukraine to basically give up. He asked for Ukraine to hand over Donetsk. In return, Russia could hand over some parts of occupied southern Ukraine. What is being meant with parts is obviously completely unclear. It's also possible that this is once again a misunderstanding, and he basically just says, I'm not going to take the rest of Kherson and Zaporizhzhia that the Russians have annexed. And for the Ukrainians, it would mean that they would lose the fortress belt here, Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, Kostiantynivka and Drushkivka, which is stopping the Russians for many years already. And behind that is the Donbas line, which would also be inside of that area. Ukraine would basically not be able to continue defending itself in the Donbas if they were to hand it over. This would only be acceptable for Ukraine if it would come with guarantees that make any further Russian aggression a no-starter. So unless that is happening, Ukraine cannot basically cannot even accept it, even if they wanted to, because it would not be far from a capitulation. Interesting too is that Donald Trump, according to the Financial Times, urged Zelensky to accept Putin's turn or Ukraine would be destroyed. And this is happening a mere month after he said that I think Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, is in a position to win, to fight and win all of Ukraine back in its original form. So within a month, it went from Ukraine is going to reconquer all of its territory to Ukraine will be destroyed. All of this after one phone call with Vladimir Putin. But that was it for today's SITREP. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. It helps with the algorithm. Leave a comment if you have something to add. And if you're new here, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss future videos. This channel is only possible because of the support of viewers like you. If you like to support the channel, you can do so by the means in the description. But that's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.